really makes you wonder what actually happens on day 15 or day 30. Well, today, we're moving way past that initial hype. We're going to dive into the actual 30-day technical reality of using a PS5 as your daily Linux desktop and gaming rig. We'll look at the undeniable triumphs, and more importantly, the really severe technical hurdles that come along with it.
There's this quote from the community that just totally hits the nail on the head. That combination should not exist. And yet, it perfectly captures that surreal, almost impossible feeling of seeing a full Ubuntu desktop and your entire Steam library natively loading up on PlayStation hardware. Honestly, it feels a bit like breaking the laws of physics in the gaming world. But how does it actually run when the honeymoon phase wears off?
Section 1, the Linux PS5 Dream. Okay, let's dive into this. To understand why getting this to work is such a massive deal, we have to look under the hood. The PS5 isn't just some closed magical box. It's actually a remarkably capable PC. Underneath that sleek white plastic, you've got a CPU that's roughly equivalent to an AMD Ryzen 3700X, and that's paired with a custom AMD RDNA 2 GPU. Now, just to put that graphics power into a relatable perspective today, in standard PC benchmark terms, the PS5's GPU performs right around the level of a GTX 1070, and that is a dedicated graphics card that still commands a $150 to $200 price tag on the used market in 2026. So, on paper, this makes the PS5 a highly capable Linux machine. The real question, though, is whether it's actually usable for a real person every single day.
Which brings us to Section 2, the jailbreak process. This entirely offline exploit was originally discovered by security researcher Andy Nguyen, who goes by The Flow online. And I want to highlight a massive point of relief right out of the gate here. This runs completely offline. As long as your console never connects to the internet while in this jailbreak mode, Sony literally cannot see it. That means your PlayStation Network accounts stay totally safe.
But getting there involves a pretty rigid, unforgiving setup process. Honestly, I'd give it a difficulty rating of about 7 out of 10. First off, your PS5 has to be on older firmware, specifically versions 3.xx to 4.xx. If your console auto-updated at any point, you're permanently locked out, full stop. Second, you're going to need a local DNS server set up via a laptop or router to actually serve the exploit. Third, you need a very specific USB hub. And fourth, you just need pure patience. That first successful boot can easily take 3 solid hours of frustrating troubleshooting. And here is the hidden annoyance that those quick viral explainers totally skip over. The exploit does not persist. No, every single time you turn the PS5 off, you have to go back through the jailbreak process. That means spending 4 to 6 minutes connecting your router and navigating the browser exploit every single time you power the machine on. After 30 days, yeah, it becomes muscle memory. But early on, it is a massive friction point.
Section 3, the hardware interface headaches. Now we're pivoting sharply into the core technical focus of our explainer today. See, week 1 was super fun, but week 2 is when the reality of running unsupported software on proprietary hardware really hit hard. Right off the bat, the PS5's front USB ports behave incredibly unpredictably under Linux. You'll be typing and keyboards will just randomly disconnect. USB hubs will completely drop devices after sleep cycles. Finding a hub configuration that actually works reliably will take hours of just raw trial and error.
And nothing illustrates this physical hardware friction better than the controller. Think about how incredibly immersive the native DualSense is. It's wireless, it has those amazing haptics, the adaptive triggers. But under Linux, it is reduced to a stripped-down, dead-weight, wired USB gamepad. You have no wireless capability, no haptics, no adaptive triggers, and usually not even touchpad input. You are literally physically tethered to a heavily compromised version of what is usually a premium controller.
All right, Section 4, driver limits and performance. Let's pivot to how this actually runs games. Like I said, week 1 was a blast testing older titles through Valve's Proton compatibility layer. You've got games like Halo, Combat Evolved, effortlessly hitting 90 frames per second, and Stardew Valley running flawlessly. Even Elden Ring was surprisingly smooth at 1080p. But then came week 2, when we started pushing the system with newer games that illusion completely shattered. So it brings up a central conflict you have to consider. Why do modern AAA games struggle so much here? I mean, why does powerful hardware that handles visually stunning PlayStation exclusives perfectly suddenly choke, artifact, and stutter on newer PC titles when it's running Linux?
The answer, for sure, lies in the drivers. It's a classic bottleneck. Think of Sony's native PS5 drivers like a custom-tailored suit. They are deeply, specifically optimized for this exact hardware configuration to squeeze out every single drop of graphical power. But those open-source Linux drivers for this APU? They're basically an off-the-rack suit. I mean, they fit, they work, but they simply cannot maximize the APU's full potential in the same way.
So the crucial point is that massive 20 to 30%. Because of these driver limits, that's the chunk of performance you're just leaving right on the table. When modern games push the hardware hard, the lack of deeply optimized native drivers creates a very real, very noticeable bottleneck that you just can't ignore.
This bottleneck becomes incredibly clear when you do real-time testing. Obviously, you see Halo hitting an impressive 90 FPS, but then look at Crimson Desert. That's a modern AAA title, and under Linux, it basically crawls at roughly 35 FPS with noticeable hitching and heavy visual artifacts like these really muddy textures. Keep in mind, this is a game that runs beautifully on the exact same PS5 hardware in its native PlayStation mode. The hardware is more than willing, but the Linux drivers just aren't there yet for modern, heavy-lifting workloads.
So beyond gaming, what about using it as a daily driver computer? Well, the results are kind of a mixed bag that once again points straight back to those hardware interface and driver quirks. Web browsing is good. LibreOffice is perfect if you're just typing up documents. You could even do some basic 1080p video editing. But try playing a 4K YouTube video and it gets super choppy because of that unoptimized GPU decoding. Discord technically works, but you're going to encounter these really frustrating audio stutters. So it's capable, sure, but it is certainly not seamless.
However, just when you might think this whole experiment proves it's all a massive headache, we hit an unexpected twist. Section 5. The emulation silver lining. Honestly, this is the twist that actually justifies the entire difficult setup process and all of those driver limitations we just talked about.
That twist is RPCS3, which is a highly complex, open-source PlayStation 3 emulator. If you know anything about the PS3, you know its cell architecture is notoriously difficult to emulate. It requires immense raw CPU power. And ironically, Sony officially refuses to offer any sort of native PS3 backwards compatibility on the PS5 itself. But the results here, they are absolutely incredible. Killzone 2, which is one of the hardest games to emulate period, runs at a locked 30 frames per second. Metal Gear Solid 4 is actually fully playable. And Demon's Souls, it runs better on a PS5 through Linux than on most mid-range dedicated PCs from 2019. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate irony. Sony's own hardware, running a jailbroken Linux setup, entirely dominates at emulating Sony's own older console. It is just an absolute powerhouse for this specific task. Which brings us to Section 6, the final verdict. After 30 days of dealing with hardware friction, missing controller features, massive setup headaches, but also experiencing those emulation triumphs, where do we stand? Interestingly enough, the system as a whole is quite stable. Over the entire month, there were only 4 hard crashes, and power consumption was actually slightly lower than native PS5 gaming. But you have to ask, who is this actually for?
Here's the definitive breakdown. Yes, you should absolutely do this if you have a spare console sitting in a closet on an older firmware specifically to build a dedicated living room PS3 emulation machine. But no, you should avoid this entirely if it's your only console, if you cared all about accessing the PlayStation Network, or if you're seeking maximum performance from modern AAA PC games. Remember those driver limits. A used $400 PC will easily beat this for modern titles.
Ultimately, the PS5 Linux experiment is a truly remarkable technical achievement by the community. It proves the hardware is wildly capable, even if the drivers and the physical interfaces throw up constant hurdles. It leaves us with one final, really provocative question. Would you sacrifice PlayStation Network convenience and deal with all that hardware friction just to unlock your console's hidden potential? Next time you look at your hardware drawer, think about what you value more. A locked ecosystem that just simply works, or having total machine control.